We have asked. You all can see, is it recording?
Oh yeah, it is ready. Yes.
It's recording. You can press present in Teams because it's not in the presentation mode.
Very lag. Wait. Okay, can already.
Wait. Not okay, can already. Then I start. Okay. Hello, Professor. Today we'll be presenting our project titled Systematic Barriers Faced by Low-Income Communities. This project was completed by our team, Cindy Teo, Kelvin Liu, which is myself, Muhammad Wafi, Pamela Lim, Suni Shi, and Yang Xiangyang. In this project, we aim to understand how reinforcing systematic barriers, such as debt accumulation, poor health outcomes, and limited access to education and career opportunities, trap individuals and families in a long-term cycle of poverty. Here's a quick overview of today's presentation. Next. On the introduction and purpose of the study, poverty remains one of the most persistent and complex issues facing the world today. For low-income communities, it is often a self-reinforcing cycle rather than a temporary condition. This study adopts a system-thinking perspective, modeling how financial strain, limited opportunities, and health deterioration are interconnected, creating reinforcing loops that deepen poverty across generations. Thanks. To capture these complex interactions, we develop a dynamic system model that simulates an individual's financial life cycle. The model tracks how salary, expenses, debt, mental health, and career growth evolve over time. Our baseline scenario is based on a starting monthly income of $1,500, reflective of low-income norms. We also incorporate external influences such as education access, job market conditions, interest rates, and personal financial habits. The model underwent structural, behavioral, and face validation to ensure it reflects real-world poverty dynamics accurately and behaves robustly under different scenarios. This framework sets the foundation for the sensitivity analysis and insights we will present later. At this point, I would like to invite Cindy to present our problem statement and walk you through the underlying logic of our model.
In this study, our core problems include poverty in low-income communities, which is systematic and generational, not just a temporary lack of money. It is also reinforced by interconnected issues like rising debt, poor health, and limited access to education and stable job. Low income and poor health reduce work capacity, which in turn increase financial strain and drive debt accumulation. Over time, this reinforcing barriers trap individuals and families, restricting upward mobility across generation. Next. In our hypothesis, we look into the behavior over time graph, which over the year shows that health steadily decline while financial strain and debt rise sharply. Meanwhile, incomes and education opportunity grows very slow, unable to keep pace with increasing financial burden. From this trend, the hypothesis was developed, which is reinforced link between financial strain, debt accumulation, and health deterioration, severely limits the effectiveness of small improvements in income or education. As the gap between financial resource and obligation widen, poverty deepens and overall well-being decline. This highlights that isolated improvements are insufficient. The system must be tracked holistically to break the cycle. Next. In the causal root diagram, here it maps out the system structure through two key reinforcing feedback loops, which is R1, which show how poor financial health reduce education access, limit career opportunity, and in turn further reduce income. On the other hand, R2 highlights how financial stress deteriorate health, lower work capacity, and worsen career prospect. Together, this loop show poverty is a self-reinforcing and multidimensional problem that compounds across time without strategic intervention. Next, I will pass over to Xiangyang.
I'm Yang Xiaoyang. I'll continue to the assumption and the limitation. The basic assumption is that poverty operates as a self-reinforcing system, where initial disadvantages compound over time without external intervention. The co-reinforcing feedback loop assumes that the low income leads to worsened financial and health outcomes, which in turn reduce the individual's ability to recover financially. This disadvantage is assumed to intensify over time, making it increasingly difficult for the individual to escape poverty. For example, poor health limits education level and working efficiency to lead more health issues. Another aspect, the reinforcing feedback model doesn't consider external impact, such as economic change, policy shifts. It also doesn't simulate the unpredictable events, such as job loss, major disease, or sudden death. The model also lacks the consideration for device pathway. Next, please. This model outlines the keystone, flows, and the feedback structures incorporated into the model to simulate poverty dynamics over time. It is designed to reflect how multiple factors are dynamically interrelated and evolve over time. The model emphasizes how compounding feedback loops, rather than isolated events, trap individuals in long-term poverty when no system interventions are present. The feedback loop also critical for modeling system causality. For example, high debt leads to more stress, which is caused with mental health and reduced productivity. It's limited career growth or falling income, so that even more debt. Conversely, access to education improves job prospects to get better salary to improve financial health. It's reduced stress and positive mental well-being loop. Now we'll pass to Xu Yishi.
Okay, hi, I'm Yishi. So I'll be explaining for the results. So for the following results, present the baseline simulation of the system dynamic model under default conditions without any external interventions such as education funding, health support, or career subsidies. So the main point is the model simulates the long-term financial and human capacity trajectory of low-income individuals starting with a modest monthly salary of 1,500. So standard living expenses and limited access to career mobility or higher educational opportunity. So this shows a serious issue. So outflows are much higher than the inflows for the bank balance, and outflows are also simply put, the organization is spending more than it earns, so threatening its long-term financial survival. And for the debt accumulation, as we can see, the debt starts relatively low and stable. However, around year 20, it begins to rise steadily, and by year 40, the growth becomes exponential. So by year 60, debt has got close to $1 million. So this exponential rise in debt suggests serious underlying financial issues. So it is likely the result of persistent budget shortfalls, rising operational costs, or ineffective financial management. And for the debt interest payments start off low but begin rising steadily after year 20. From there, the growth accelerates sharply and reaching over 70,000 per year by year 60. So this is a clear sign of exponential growth in interest expenses. And all these baselines reflects the natural behavior of the poverty system when no proactive measures are taken to alter feedback structures. Also, by analyzing the result trends, we can observe how internal reinforcing loops such as escalating debt burdens and declining health gradually erode financial stability and entrench long-term poverty. So this sets a critical reference point for evaluating the effectiveness of policy interventions discussed in subsequent sections. I'll pass to Pam.
Okay, I'll be presenting this for the
Okay,
slide.
sorry.
Yeah. So the purpose overall of our sensitivity analysis is to show how an individual starting with the same $1,500 monthly income can experience very different financial outcomes depending on external factors. By keeping the starting salary constant, and altering conditions like career growth, education access, interest rates, and repayment behavior, we demonstrate that systematic poverty is shaped not just by income, but by compounding forces that influence an individual's long-term trajectory. For the career opportunities, we find that access to better career growth dramatically reduces debt accumulation and significantly improves bank balances over time. In scenarios where career opportunities are expanded, such as through inclusive hiring or skill mobility policies, individuals are able to achieve upward financial mobility and escape the poverty cycle. Isha, can you go to career opportunities? The first one. No, no. Back. Yeah, this one. Yeah, okay. Thank you. Without these opportunities, however, even consistent repayment efforts struggle to produce stable outcomes. This is because they cannot escape poverty if their career environment is stagnant. This highlights career opportunities as one of the strongest levers for long-term poverty alleviation. I'll now hand over to Pamela, who will share more about the other sensitivity analysis.
Pam cannot hear.
I think she disconnected.
Okay. Pam?
Hi, I'm Pam. So I will continue with the sensitivity analysis. So this slide highlights how education access affects financial outcome. Higher education level correlate with slower debt accumulation and healthier bank balances over time. In contrast, lack of access to quality education hinders financial progress, amplifying earlier disadvantages throughout life. Next. Here we examine the impact of interest rate. Representing economic condition, the left chart shows that higher interest rate cause debt to grow exponentially, quickly overwhelming even disciplined individuals. On the right, we see that bank balance erode much faster under high interest condition, underscoring how unfavorable economic environment can undermine personal financial effort. Next. Finally, we look at the impact of repayment rate, reflecting personal financial discipline. The left chart shows that lower repayment rate allowed debt to accumulate rapidly, while higher repayment rate slow this growth. On the right, higher repayment rate help to preserve or even grow bank balance, but the effect is still limited by surrounding economic context. This demonstrates that while discipline matters, its benefits are constrained by larger systemic forces. In short, this analysis makes it clear. Achieving financial stability isn't just about how much you earn, it's about the system and structure that shape your journey over time. Systemic factors like opportunity, education, economic, environment, and discipline interact in complex ways, ultimately determining whether individuals can achieve long-term financial security or trap in cycle of debt. Next, I will hand over to Wifi.
Thank you. So from our key learnings, our model tracks 5 stocks, which is bank balance, debt, education, career prospects, and health. Each period, the bank balance updates by adding income and subtracting expenses and debt repayment. Similar, stock flow rules govern education and health, because any deficit lowers tomorrow's earnings or well-being. Shortfalls compound like interest. That's why isolated cash handout rarely change the long-term path. So the reinforcing loop quickly rebuild the debt. When the health falls below 50, the productivity penalty rise fourfold, cutting wages by up to 20%. Conversely, health gains remain negligible until savings exceed $500. Beyond that point, each extra 1,000 yields outsized benefits. Households sitting just above or below this breakpoint diverge by roughly $100,000 over 20 years. Hence, well-timed, precisely targeted support that nudges a key stock across its threshold is far more effective than untargeted transfer. Next. Our sensitivity analysis rank 4 questions. First, broad education access has the largest systemic effect. So it lifted the wages early and shrinks debt quickly. Second, career opportunities, inclusive hiring, mobility programs amplify those education gains. They are the multiplier. Third, interest rate caps work more slowly, but by flattening the debt curve, they buy time. They should be complement, not replace human capital policies. Finally, tweaking the payment rate in isolation offers little lasting benefit. Without high income, people slip back into borrowing. We then stress test the model with simulations, dropping the interest rate from 85%, cut long run debt by 35%, and added a $9,000 cash buffer. More importantly, switching to liquidity linked repayment rules, so installment rise only when the cash flow is positive. Half default risk versus a rigid 10% schedule. The takeaway is clear. Combine cheap credit with adaptive repayment to create breathing space while education and clear policy do the minimum. Next. To conclude, poverty is fundamentally feedback driven. Our model shows that 5 stocks, which is bank balance, debt, education, career opportunities, and health, interact like compound interest. Deficits in any one stock reinforce shortfalls in the others. So poverty persists even without new external shocks. So the simulation mirrors reality. We reproduce these stylized facts, which is debt growth exponentially when inflation is high, productivity collapse as health deteriorates, and wages only accelerate, only schooling process a clear threshold. That validation gives us confidence in the policy test. And leverage is uneven, raising the education investment cap from 5 to 8% of savings delivers the largest long-term debt boost. Capping interest at 5% yields almost the same benefit by cutting the debt curve. In contrast, simply asking households to repay more without boosting income offers only temporary relief. Next. Timing and targeting matters. Modest $1,000 health voucher delivers precisely when health status is already double long run net worth in 40% of cases. Likewise, bundling support for household sitting within plus or minus $5,000 of solvency moves 73% of them into stable territory, compared with only 18% when the same budget was spread thinly. So our simulation point to 4 different principles: dropping the interest rate from 8 to 5%, cut cumulative debt by 35%, and create a $9,000 cash buffer. 2, repayment that adjusts to liquidity rather than fixed 10% rule, half default risk. Education and career levels remain the highest long-term return levels, albeit with a lag. Finally, health spending acts as an economic multiplier because it protects productivity. So the overarching insight is that poverty relief is not about larger budgets, it's about aligning the low-cost credit, protected education funding, adaptive repayment, and health buffers exactly at solvency thresholds. When we hit those leverage points together, we flip the feedback loops from vicious to virtuous and create durable upward mobility rather than just cushioning the point. Next. So thank you for listening. I hope our work sparks stimulus to reverse those vicious cycles. Thank you.